Well, good morning and welcome to another conversation with Constance. That would be me. How are you this morning, this mid-week day? How are you doing? I am in the Washington, Maryland area, just outside of Washington, D.C. And I don't want to complain about the weather, but it's really cold here. Last week we had snow and ice. And so we're still trying to get over that. And I don't want to say too much about it because I know people in other parts of the country are dealing with a lot of bad weather, and we just got hit with it. So I'm not going to complain too much. But I would love to know where you are watching me from and how is the weather there and how are you keeping warm? So listen, have you ever said life feels tough right now? Because it does. But have you ever felt that like things are not getting easier, they're getting tougher? Or have you ever said, I feel stuck, like things are just not moving? Listen, I've said that more times than I would like to admit. But I want to talk to you today about patterns because maybe it's your patterns that make you feel stuck or like there's no, movement in your career, in your personal life. Maybe it's the things, those habits that you do without even knowing it, that may be keeping you feeling like you're in a position that you just can't get out of. So we're going to talk about patterns today. Now, patterns are not wrong. They're just strategies. They are like I said, the habits and the things that you do almost automatically without thinking about them. They're not wrong. At some point, they worked for you. Patterns help you manage responsibilities. Patterns help you manage expectations, and they help you just kind of keep life moving. But the question is not whether or not your habits are good or bad, but whether your habits are serving you now, supporting the person you want to become. That's the real question. Now, I'm going to give you an example. My yes-no pattern when I was in TV news was totally crazy. When I think about it now, I think, how could that have been my pattern that I thought would help me move my career along? For example, I would say yes to adding hours to an already crazy schedule. I would say yes, even though I was exhausted, even though I was drained. I would say yes to taking on more projects, even though I didn't have the time. But I thought that would help me win favor in the eyes of my boss. I said yes to negative self-talk as a way to motivate myself. Think how crazy that is. But I said yes to it. And I said yes to showing up, even though I was, drained, even though I couldn't really think straight. I showed up. I said yes to the things that I really should have said no. And I said no to rest, proper rest. I used to think it was a badge of honor to be able to get by on 5 hours of sleep. Think how crazy that is. I said no to support, and I said no to anything that really would empower me. Now, I know it sounds crazy, but I want you to stop for a second, particularly if you're a woman, because this is what we do. We put that blue cape on and we think we can manage it all. We can go to work and carry a heavy load at work, and then we could come home and carry a heavy load at work. We could take care of our kids, be the driver, be the cook, be the caregiver, do all the things. But the thing that we don't do is take care of ourselves. And so over time, this becomes a pattern. It feels normal. It feels like the responsible thing to do. And so we keep moving along. And at some point, particularly as we get older, I know this really started to hit me at 55 and at 60, it was like, this isn't working. But it was the pattern that I chose for myself. And I didn't really know that it was a pattern. So I just kept doing it. And what the thing was, when I started looking into this, right, when I started looking into the patterns, what I discovered was that these patterns that I have were actually draining me, actually, you know, I was getting ready to say killing me because that's what it felt like. But they were slowly draining my enthusiasm for anything and everything. And when I peeled back the onion, what I discovered was that underneath my patterns, those negative patterns that I have, was fear. Not the kind of like, oh, crazy fear, but that fear that says, if you don't do this, you'll disappoint people. Or the fear of being judged negatively as a coworker, as a colleague, as a manager. It was that fear that kept me saying yes when I really should have said no. That fear that stopped me from taking care of myself, but making sure that everybody around me was okay and had what they needed. And I think, again, ladies, this is not new to us because we typically are the caregivers. We are the ones who dot every I and cross every T. And so the idea of putting our needs, hopes, and dreams ahead of others feels selfish, but it really isn't. I had to face that tough I had to face that tough situation I was in that said, what are you going to? Are you going to choose yourself, or are you going to keep going down a path that is really not serving you? And so I started working on breaking my patterns. And I started thinking about the person I wanted to become and what patterns and habits would support that person. I want you to put in the chat if this is resonating with you. Can you see this pattern in your life? The only way to break a negative pattern is to become aware of it. You have to become aware of your patterns. So I want you to take a moment to think about the patterns and the habits that you have. What do you say yes to that you would really like to say no to? What do you put on the back burner because you think it's safer when you really should start to put it in front of you and to work on it? What dream have you delayed because you keep thinking, now is not the time. I just have to keep working. I have to wait until my kids are in college. And then after your kids are in college, you say, I have to wait until they get settled. What dreams are you delaying because you have this pattern of thinking that you have to do everything and be everything to everyone else? So when I sat down and I realized what my patterns are, and I realized the fear that was driving those patterns, I sat down and decided which patterns no longer served me and which ones I was going to eliminate. And it's easier said than done. But the first step is to become aware of your patterns, aware of what you're doing. And then the next step is to intentionally decide that you're going to go a different path. Becoming aware of my patterns of like saying yes when I really wanted to say no led me to intentionally start to develop boundaries. I started saying no. I know my first big no in TV news was that I was no longer going to take non-emergency news calls after my work hours. Gosh, I got to tell you, that felt so weird to me not to pick up the phone as soon as it rang. But I had to train myself. I had to train myself not to be at the beck and call 24/7. So if you take a look at your patterns, that might be one of the things that you do, is to set clear boundaries. The other thing is to be more realistic with your expectations for yourself, for your family, for your colleagues. Don't expect that, for example, that you're going to be able to operate indefinitely on no sleep. That's not a realistic expectation. But take a look at your patterns, set boundaries, and set realistic expectations. Only you know what they're going to be, right? Only you can decide what is reasonable and what is unreasonable once you look at it from a different perspective. The other thing is develop more positive self-talk. Because underneath a lot of this are negative things that we say to ourselves. We say things like, if I wasn't so lazy, if I wasn't so selfish. And those things, those words do not help. They hurt. They keep you stuck. And you have to change that language. And you have to have more compassion for yourself. Give yourself grace. Give yourself compassion, the same grace and compassion that you would offer a friend if they were talking to you about being stuck and changing negative patterns. And the one big thing I want to tell you is, listen, rest without guilt. I used to go on 5 hours, and that was simply not enough sleep. And when I started to sleep more, it felt weird. 6 hours felt like, oh my gosh, that's forever, right? But it wasn't. You know, I've trained myself now to know when my body needs rest and to give it however much rest it needs. And so I want you to look at your patterns, because growth isn't about starting over. I'm not asking you to wipe the slate clean and to start over. I'm asking you to update the habits and the patterns that you currently have and eliminate the ones that don't support you, that are actually keeping you stuck. So I have a question for you. What patterns are you ready to update? What patterns can you change that would help you become the person you want to be? Just sit and think about that question for a minute. Well, for longer than a minute, but just sit and think about that question. And then journal. Write down your patterns. Write down how those patterns make you feel. Write down how those patterns make you show up in the world. And then decide, is that the way I want to show up? Is that the way I want to feel? And if it's not, then sit down and intentionally come up with new habits. And like I said, give yourself grace. If this message has resonated with you, please hit the subscribe button and click the bell so you'll be notified when any new episodes are posted. And if you're seeing me for the first time, welcome again. And if you're coming back, thank you for your support. I appreciate it. I don't take for granted the time that you give me. And I hope that I'm giving you the information and the messages that will help you build the kind of life that you want. So until next time, until next time, take care, and I will see you next time.